Welcome to our broadcast. I'm your host, Michael Lange, and this is Oakland Is. We're opening up our new season, and we thought it would be best to talk about the new president of the United States, Mr. Barack Obama.
Maybe America had moved on further than I thought it had, because my position was there's nowhere in the world a black man is going to get elected president of the United States
in our lifetime.
At least in this time right now. And so I turned out to be wrong on that, but finding out that I was wrong was midstream after he started really moving, and after Iowa, I began to see that there was an invisible hand, not in the economic Adam Smith sense, but in the spiritual sense, that there was a force out there that was bringing this young man to fruition. And the more that I looked at him and studied him, I can begin to see that all the way from his, what I call his incubation period.
Yeah.
His time in the islands, as he was born in Hawaii, then raised in Indonesia, a predominantly Muslim country, and then back to Hawaii, and then arriving on the mainland as a young man. So his formative years, he was in that incubator, as I call it.
A lot of us would think that the first introduction that we had was the Democratic National Convention in 2004, and that Edward Kennedy, the senator, had a lot to do with that. So, but
well,
you're saying
John Kerry had asked him to be the keynote speaker.
So that kind of put him out there on the national on the national scene.
And that was a good entree. And you would never have thought that 4 years later that a young man would be president of the United States. The fact that he was being elected Senate was a milestone in itself, even though Illinois had already had previously a black senator in Carol Moseley Braun. But then for him to be introduced at the convention the way he is, and then 4 years later, again, that spiritual context I have to give you. Dr. King says, I have been to the mountaintop. And I've seen the promised land. Now, what is Denver? The mile-high city.
That's right.
So that mountain in Denver, Martin Luther King must have been on that mountain, and he must have been looking down into that stadium where 75,000 people had packed in to see this young black man give his acceptance speech as president of the United States.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. So I know that the internet had a lot to do. Young people showed up, they stepped up to the plate. All of the things that needed to happen happened, because he's up against a huge machine with the Clinton machine, and yet he was able to navigate successfully through all this.
Well, again, that's why I say that's why divine providence has to be there, because there was just too many obstacles. His name, his background, his birthright, all of these things should be worked. His time and grade in terms of seniority in the Senate. All of these things, the obstacle of the amount of money that you had to raise, the formidable candidating machine he was up against. All of these things in front of him kept getting knocked down. Every obstacle that popped up, whether it was Reverend Wright, boom, pushed aside, and he's constantly overcoming these things. Now, Barack has to know, like I know, that wasn't him. It wasn't him. There was, call it destiny, call it providence, call it God, call it whatever you want to. This young man was a conglomeration of a lot of things put into that body, and he became the personification of all of our hopes and dreams, white, black, whatever, for America. Barack Obama has done that for us and brought us to the next level.
Wow. So let's do a fast forward. He makes it into the White House, and we don't want to take anything away from the inauguration speech and how powerful that was, and the feeling that people had, and the lack of negative incidents associated with the inauguration with that many folks there. He gets into the first 100 days. What have you seen show up for us in terms of the dream or in terms of the platform?
Well, again, our struggle as just speaking as African Americans has been, as Malcolm says, social, political, and economic. Those are the elements that we needed to deal with. Well, let us say that Frederick Douglass, through W.E.B. Du Bois, through A. Philip Randolph, through Paul Robeson to Martin Luther King was our social context. We were trying to be socially accepted in America. We were trying to be accepted as human beings, you see. Struggle being to be able to move socially in this country without being hindered. Then Malcolm came along and told us, now is the time of the ballot or the bullet.
Yeah. So that's
luckily we chose the ballot.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's what Selma and voter registration and the Voter Registration Act was about. Our struggle was political, to try to just be the dog catcher or the mayor or, you know, whatever. So here we are then, as we have struggled through that, we've gone from city councils like I served on in Oakland to mayors of cities of New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. You know, we've had every major city in the United States has had a black mayor.
But not without obstacles along
the way. Oh, no,
the
everything we've done has been with obstacles.
Okay.
And so it's been then governors. I mean, Doug Wilder and now Patterson and the governor of Massachusetts and everything. So we've attained these positions, and then bam, out of the blue, this man makes the presidency. So our political struggle is over. So what's left? Economics.
Oh, boy.
Now, isn't it wonderful that at the time that he comes into office, the first and biggest problem on his plate is not the national economy, but the global economy. He is now responsible for fixing the economy of the whole world. Now, having that as his problem, how does that relate to us as African Americans? Again, we cannot rely on politicians to do our job for us. The struggle continues. We must now be up on our economics and have our economic agenda ready to put in front of him, because we're going to have to do for him the same thing that Franklin Roosevelt told A. Philip Randolph. He says, I agree with everything you told me, Mr. Randolph, and everything that you're talking about needs to be done and everything. I totally agree with it. He said, now go out and make me do it.
Wow. And so we saw the Work Progress Administration come through Roosevelt, right?
Right.
We saw a lot of the, the Social Security came out of that.
Yeah, all of those social kinds of safety net kinds of things that emerged. But as far as our agenda as African Americans was concerned, Randolph had to go out and threaten a march on Washington and a few other things to get them to open up the jobs in the federal government, to start talking about integrating the military and all of those kinds of issues that were African American issues. We had to make the president do that. And what he was saying by that is, put it up on the agenda, bring it out, however you put it up on the national table, then I have no choice but to address it.
Okay.
So we can't go to Barack and say, what about reparations and what about all these things? What we have to do as a people is make sure that we put our issue up on the table so that he now says, I have to address it.
Right. So for example, let's just take the reparations issue and the possibility that he might go 8 years. It doesn't seem to be on the radar in the first 4 years, the reparations issue, but possibly it could be if we prime the pump, if we get the facts together and present it, that might be something to discuss in the next 4 years.
Well, I think that we shouldn't be timid about it. We should take the approach that Malcolm took, and that is be bold, and the same approach that Barack took when he ran for office. Be bold in our demands. Be bold in our advocacy. This is not a time for us to be timid and say, brother, we don't want to put you in an embarrassing position. No. We have to practice what we preach. We have been saying since we came off the slave ship, color should not matter. Race should not matter. All right, so I don't care what color Barack Obama is. I care about his politics and the fact that he's president of the United States. And I'm going to be just as hard on him. So, given the fact that this is a co-equal branch of government, and again, divine providence is teaching us that lesson, Barack is the president and in charge of the executive branch of government.
Right.
The legislative branch of government is a co-equal and separate branch and has nothing to do with him. So if he says, I'm not in the mood to go back and look at torture and look at Cheney and all the crimes that they've done because I want to move forward, there is nothing that is stopping the legislative branch from bringing that issue up. Congress can have hearings, the Attorney General can have investigations. That's all separate and apart from the president. Well, it's the same way with the issue of reparations. John Conyers has put a bill in, and it's back in again. Every year he puts it in every session. HR 40. 40 for 40 acres and a mule. So he always waits until that 39th bill goes in, and he puts his in every year so that he gets that number, H.R. 40. H.R. 40 is the reparations study proposal. And Conyers, as chairman of the Judiciary Committee now, can bring that up anytime he wants to. So why not bring it up? In other words, make the president have to address the issue. Just as he's saying right now, I'm not going to address the issue of torture. I'm going on, right? But if the Congress brings it up,
he's got to address it.
I've got to address it. And so that's what I'm saying. On any issue that we have as a community, we have to get it together. We should not be caught like Dr. John. I was in the right place, but it must have been the wrong time. See, this is the right time. We just got to have the right agenda. And I don't know that we have that economic agenda that African Americans are asking for, but I hope education and the schools have something to do with that.
Well, now let's talk about the economy and Barack Obama, because it seems like the first thing that Barack was preoccupied with was undoing a lot of the stuff that Bush had done in the 8 years that he was the president. So he had to come in multitasking to undo a lot of things. So how does he focus on the economy, or does he multitask and undo something that happens on the international scene that Bush has done, and then still begin to tinker with the economy?
Well, that's why he has all those cabinet positions. And that's why he's as smart as he is. That's why the Lord prepared him to be as smart as he is, because he is going to have to multitask. And he has been doing it magnificently. Every day almost, he's rolling out a new initiative that he's putting his attention into. So the economy calls for him to have to be there. And in that first 100 days, everybody kept saying, well, you know, he's not doing this, he's not doing that. Where's the plan and everything? And again, from our lack of understanding about the fact that we're no longer in a national economy. This is a global economy. So the most important economic meeting that Barack had to put together was not his bailout bill or anything with Congress. It was that G20 meeting in London, where the currency for the international economy had to be set. The currency rates, the relative values of the various currencies had to be agreed upon. Once that's agreed upon, now the private sector can place their bets at the economic table, roulette wheel or whatever. But if there's no certainty as to what the relative values of the various currencies are going to be and what the Chinese are going to do about the I.M.F., everybody's holding back. And so for that period of time until April, he used that time very wisely to work with Congress and put all of his initiatives in place, and then raising the issues that he wanted raised.
So he's following, apparently he sees the bigger picture. I mean, you know, the fact that he doesn't get involved in the day-to-day issues, let's say the issue of race. Even when Jeremiah Wright was doing his thing during the campaign period, he just seemed to stay above the fray. He knew exactly when to strike, when to go in and make a statement. But everybody else was running saying, well, what do you think about that? And he wasn't making any comment.
Well, during the campaign, he ran, a magnificent campaign, perfectly calculated, beautifully funded by the grassroots, and raised an extraordinary amount of money. I forgot how much it was, a couple of $100 billion or a million or something like that.
It was the most,
Right, and so the campaign is different. See, there's two types of politics. There's the politics of election, and then there's the politics of governing. He did magnificently in the politics of election. Now he's into the politics of governing. And people would expect the governing part to be parallel or right with the election part. No. There's a difference between courting your future wife and all the charm that you have to use to get her to come to you, and then once you got her in your fold and then you got a home, things change and you have to shift into another mode. Well, that's where Brother Barack is right now. He's into the politics of governing, and that's where his cabinet selections and everything mean a lot, because each one of those parties have to be able to go out and marshal their own issues and then fight for his attention and the public's attention for him to be able to address these issues in a systemic way.
Yeah, you brought it up, which is a good point. Michelle Obama, his wife, what role does she play? How do you think she's playing out as the first lady?
Another perfect piece of that puzzle. That's what I'm trying to tell you, that divine conglomeration. All of these elements have been poured into this one man, this beautiful wife, these two little beautiful daughters, this absolutely gorgeous black woman who is there. And then they even go get grandma and bring her in. So now
to the White House,
now we get a chance to see the whole black family operating out there, and Michelle then being that other extension of him. Because when he comes from downstairs at the Oval Office and goes upstairs, and you think his day is over, he still has this very intelligent woman. Bill Clinton used to say, Hillary's smarter than me. And so you think that I'm smart. Look at what I get to do at the end of the day when I'm just doing pillow talk. I've got another person there that's giving me another point of view. And so Barack gets all of that from Michelle.
What about the court of public opinion, the press in particular, the Rush Limbaughs, the MSNBCs, the CNNs? How do you think they would grade Barack Obama?
We don't care. If you're an intelligent person and you're listening to all of these pundits, if you just followed them during the campaign and listen to what they say, you should by now know that they don't know what the hell they're talking about. But because we're in this 24/7 news cycle, they've got to fill the air with noise. The worst thing that can happen in television, as you well know, sitting here, is dead time. You do not want any silence. And so they've got to be chappering and German. And so they bring on all of these so-called experts, all these Democratic strategists, Republican strategists, and they're all just mouthing off. And Barack just ignores that.
So you say keep your eye on Barack.
Keep your eyes on the president and keep your eyes on how he uses that media for the purpose of going over the head of the politicians and talking to us, the public. Because an informed public in this information age that we're living in is the power of this democracy. And people showed that in the election. The pundits said it was Hillary and this person has all these things, is gonna win. But Barack ignored that and went right over their heads to the people, went through the internet and all the other communications to raise money. And that's where he is today. Anytime he wants to talk to the American people and get something done, all he has to do is talk to the American people and they'll talk to their congressperson.
Now, how can the people, what is it that we need to be doing, and particularly as it relates to this international global economy? What can we do as just citizens?
Stay informed. We're in an information age. 3 stages of development throughout. We started off in an agricultural age where people were all related to the farm and did something to the land. Then the factory became the cathedral of the society, and everybody now moved out of the family there where grandma and grandpa and everybody was there and went off and started their own little families and all went off to their own little jobs at the factory. Now the manufacturing jobs are gone, and we're in this information age. So there it is. Stay informed. Twitter, all of these things. This is all information. This is all about knowledge. The whole financial crisis we had, the financial crisis didn't build anything. There's no product that you could pick up and touch. All of it was information. All of it represented paper transactions that people were taking fees for doing and making money, but they weren't producing anything. So in this information age, the best thing that you can do in the democracy demands is that you stay informed. And if you don't know what the G20 is, you need to get on the search engine and find out. If you don't know what the Federal Reserve is and what it does, you need to get on there and find out. And if you don't, you need to be sending your children there to find out.
So what about I sense, I feel that there's a new paradigm, and that's the green revolution going on right now. What about that?
Well, that's just another phase of industrial development. You know, we're talking green because with all the industrialization that we've done, we've screwed up the planet. And now we're trying to back off of that. And so the whole idea is not, you know, when you're in a hole, you don't keep digging. So why would you then want to encourage China, India, and all the other countries that are trying to catch up with us to do the same things that we did to start melting those polar caps? Because when they melt for all of us on the planet. So the idea then is to try to look for new ways of doing things, and they're not really new ways of doing things, because if you look back, I was at a thing for Jerry Brown the other night. He's Attorney General, but when he was governor, I said, Jerry, aren't you proud? I said, when I came out here to the event, I passed all those windmills that you put up there on the Altamont Pass and everything. And he said, yeah, if we had to put that satellite up in the sky that we could have put up back in the 70s, we would have our own California satellite that could be broadcasting to all of our children and all of our schools and everything right now. But when I talked about putting up satellites, everybody said I was Mr. Moonbeam. I was dreaming off into space and everything. Well, that's what the Green Revolution is all about. Thinking of alternative, sustainable ways of producing the energy that we need to move this society.
So the economy could be jump-started if we could come up with these inventions or these projects that are developing green technologies, renewable energies. How do you see African Americans buying into this? What can we do?
Well, again, it's just that, you know, we don't want to be on the caboose. We want to be up front. And so beautiful thing about this whole green thing is you got a guy like Van Jones, who from Oakland, California, from the Ella Baker, Barack has brought him in as his green job guy. Well, he's out there talking about those green jobs. Again, you have to get informed, see what the future is bringing, and then get in the front and not on the tail end. Drive the train as opposed to trying to just be a ticket or passenger on the train. So the whole idea of shifting from carbon-based economy into any other kind of sources that we can do, whether it's hydroelectric or solar,
water,
wind, all of those kinds of things. Barack has now put aside the money to be able to start people off in those things. And just as we had got in on the information technology right in our backyard here in Silicon Valley, how much further we would have been down the line. The same thing is happening right now in Emeryville for us in terms of biotechnology. If our children aren't learning biology in the schools, you are robbing your child of a chance to have gainful employment if it's nothing but just dealing with test tubes and beakers and everything, doing experiments over and over again in one of these pharmaceutical houses. So that's where we are with respect to this green technology. It is being defined. This is a defining time, and we need to be there with our ideas and with our concepts, no matter how crazy it used to be to think about when I was a kid, Buck Rogers flying and Flash Gordon and all this other kind of stuff. Here we are.
It was similar with John Kennedy. He said, before the decade is out, we will have a man on the moon. That was 1961.
And we did it. And Barack has given us that same kind of inspiration, saying, before this decade is over, we ought to be able to have come up with an alternative source of energy. We ought to be able to have fixed our schools, or be well on the way of fixing our schools to plug our children into that. So he's laying out the priorities for us. Energy, education, our economy, all of these things are forward-looking. And that's where he wants to go. He doesn't want to be drugged back into torture debates and all these other kinds of things. He wants to go forward. And like I said, the beautiful thing about it is that it's the United States of America, and the economy is not as bad as everybody thinks it is. We just hit a bump in the road, and it scared everybody. So it gave him a chance to shake loose a lot of money that he never would have been able to shake loose.
Unless that thing was up
there. And
they
can claim socialism all they want to, but he is not the one who took over the banks. He is not the one who took over the Bush administration did that. So that being done, what's he to do now?
We only have about 2 minutes left, but I wanted to get your final comment on the connectiveness, the connectivity that I am my brother's keeper. That the economy, that our health care, that the politics, that everything is connected around the world, whether it's through the internet or whatever. Can you give us your insight into that?
Well, if we haven't learned that by now, we should have learned it on September 11th. The fact is that America always thought itself as being isolated away from all of that madness over there, you see?
Yes.
Well, it came to us, and it
chickens coming home to roost.
Right, but it all of a sudden made us realize that we are connected as a world, and that when children are hungry in Sudan or Somalia or whatever, children are hungry in New Orleans.
Yeah, right.
And there's no difference. We have the same connectedness and the same obligation to address the children of Katrina, which we embarrassed ourselves in front of the world by not responding properly. Well, the same thing is we're embarrassing ourselves around the world if we don't respond to Sudan, if we don't understand, understand what's going on in Darfur, if we don't understand that children in North Korea are our children and need to eat just like children in East Oakland need to eat. So the interconnectedness has always been there. That's been God's message to us from the beginning, whether, you know, you're a Christian, I'm my brother's keeper, you know, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you're a Muslim, so want for your brother what you want for yourself. All of those kinds of things are telling us that we're connected. And so if we don't see that, especially as so-called intellectuals and educated people, and not preaching that constantly, which I think African Americans have always been preaching since we arrived here. That's our mission that we're still on, and it just happens to be in an economic context right now.
And it just happens to be with President Barack Obama at the helm.
Wonderful.
Yes. So I want to thank you very much for the program and giving us the insight into the first 100 days of President Barack Obama's administration. And please, I'd like you to come back maybe at the midpoint and let's talk a little bit more about keeping our eye on the prize. So this is Michael Lange saying so long, and we'll see you next time. Good.